Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, we've got James Barnes, who's going to speak with us today. James is a father to two epic kids and married to his best friend, Courtney. He has spent most of his life looking for ways to use his voice to help people and recently started using that voice to teach realtors, companies, and medical professionals how to create kinder and safer environments for LGBTQ plus individuals. James transitioned 6 years ago and is very aware of the struggles transgender individuals experience and is hoping to be a part of the solution. When he is not training, parenting, or spending time with his wife, he loves caring for his plants, cooking a flavorful meal, and listening to some quality jazz. And with that, James, I will hand it over to you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, Sandy. And I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. I heard people are from all over the state. Even I think we got a Portland or two persons. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to share the screen and we will, here we go. And there we go. All right. Now, this is always the fun part. Give me 2 seconds because when I do this, it takes away from my arrow. So it's always fun to do tech work. So let's get this fixed up. There we go. Okay. All right. So we're going to go over some pronouns. We're going to go over some terms. And I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. I didn't know Sandy had the epic bio. So there's that. I did forget to include that I actually am also a realtor. I forget to write that in the bio. So it's not that I just like to educate realtors. I myself am a realtor. And part of the reason that I got into this presentation is because about, oh my gosh, 5 years ago, my wife and I needed to buy a home. We were selling her home. And I had transitioned about 2 years before. I had changed my name, my ID, but I didn't know how the seller was going to handle it. I didn't know how the buyer of her home would handle it. I didn't know how the realtor would handle it or the title company. And so I didn't come out. I did the really healthy thing, which is I didn't come out to anybody. And so I just spent about 30 to 45 days stressing out that the sellers were going to back out or that the buyers were going to back out or that if the realtor found out that she would stop being our realtor. I had no idea what my protection was. I had no idea what I was like allowed to fight for or that if they were allowed to discriminate. And I'm a well-educated person. I know how to Google like no one else. And I still didn't know where to look. So when we had our daughter and my wife being the breadwinner stayed at work and I became a stay-at-home dad, I decided to do a part-time job. And I thought, what would be a really easy part-time job? I know I'll become a realtor. Little did I know that that is not the case. But I did vow to myself that within my first year, I would teach an LGBTQ course to help educate the industry. And I was at 13 months, I think. So I just made it a little bit past my year mark. But it's kind of evolved into this entire other job. Last week, I just did a presentation for Del Monte Foods with the CEO and their leadership team. I've gotten to do this presentation for Comcast, and it's been really an amazing opportunity to see how many people want to learn. The reason I really have a passion for real estate, though, is because there really is the biggest window for discrimination, and it's because it's subtle. It doesn't always have to be this outright discriminatory moment. It can just be a subtle thing that we say that can hurt our client. So I thought I would jump in and educate people. Also, I just want to reference that I'm not crabby. I'm a Cancer. This is my birthday month, and Cancers are crabs. So that's where that comes from. So going over, why is this? There we go. So before we do the whole presentation and dive into some really deep things, I want to make sure we're all on the same page with a peer agreement. First and foremost, I assume the best out of all of you. I hope you assume the best out of me. And I know that we all have a willingness to learn. Also, it's okay to ask questions. You can drop them in the chat as you're thinking of them, and we'll reference them at the end. Or if you want to save them and ask them in person, we can do that as well. The only thing that I ask is that you don't ask anything you wouldn't want me to ask you in front of a bunch of other people, or let alone just one-on-one. Anything having to do with surgeries or hormones, I save for my social media. So if you want to go over there, I get to answer them in an environment that I feel safe. So I'm on Instagram as my handle is at the trans coach, or I'm on TikTok. I don't do any viral dances. I just do normal informing stuff. But on there, I am at james.thetranscoach. So those are two areas that if you do have more questions, you can go there. Also, my wife answers a lot of questions about being the spouse of a trans individual. Also, let's see. All right. Now, today's goal is to gain knowledge to better the real estate experience, whether it's for you yourself, alleviate some anxiety, or also to help your clients. It doesn't just happen overnight. I don't just hand you this PowerPoint and you know everything. It's going to be a slow process, but a few things that I can do to help you are going to be honoring the history of the LGBTQ community, breaking down some terms, giving you the empathy, helping you create the empathy by understanding the challenges that LGBTQ individuals experience. And then I'm obviously going to give you some tools, because what is knowledge if you can't actually implement it? So first and foremost, the LGBTQ history is a lot like a roller coaster. Some people know a little bit about maybe Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or the Defense of Marriage Act, or they remember seeing some big moments, on like Time Magazine when there was a gay couple kissing, and that was a huge moment. But that's all they know. They don't know that in the 70s is when the movement really, really gained traction, and that the movement was started by a trans woman who was Black and also was disabled. And she did a lot for our community. But it also then right after was homosexuality was turned into a mental illness. And so you have these great wins and losses continuously as you go through. I will not be able to go through line by line, but you can just start to see a pattern of when there's a great win, about a year or two later comes a great loss. And the psychological damage that does to a community over and over, it's a lot. It's heavy. And it makes you realize how unsafe you feel when you feel like, okay, I can put my guard down and then something else happens. And everything that I go over with you today is not just to give you an example of like, oh, this is what's happening. What I'm trying to do is create in the back of your mind empathy, because when a client comes to you and they want to buy or they want to sell, or your child comes out to you, or your neighbor lets you know that they're on the LGBTQ kind of umbrella, they're not just telling you one fact, but they are carrying the burden of what a community has gone through. They're carrying anxiety, and a lot of that anxiety comes from what society has told them, and this history has proven that. So some of the terms are going to be harder to explain, so we stick normally with the LGBTQ plus. There are wider ranging terms that you can go into if you Google it. I do encourage people to avoid the term like alphabet soup or the never ending acronym, kind of in a more mocking tone, because it's important to remember that each letter represents a person. And sometimes it can represent, multiple letters can represent one person. And we as humans do well with labels, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. Labels are how our brain work. And so the LGBTQ community has really leaned into being able to label the experiences we're having, experiences that are actually very common in other societies. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and the Q is either going to be questioning or queer. If you're not a part of the LGBTQ community, I highly encourage you not to use the word queer. Our community is trying to kind of regain the power of it, but it was used against us for a very, very long time. Some LGBTQ individuals still do not want to use it. Some really find an empowerment in it. And then there is a new term, and by no means is it new, but it is gaining some traction, of non-binary. And that is definitely getting some awareness. So we'll go into that in a little bit. So what is the difference between sex and gender and lesbian versus transgender and all of these different things. Well, sex is the biological or physical characteristics assigned with at birth. And so it's what your reproductive organs are at birth. And it's normally categorized as male, female, or intersex. And it's really important that we talk about the fact that intersex individuals are actually a very common part of our society. I believe the stats show that they are the same common, or they are just as common as redheads. And so you have somebody who is born at birth with both male and female genitalia, and the doctor makes a call. A lot of times the parents just let the doctor make a call, and a lot of times the doctor gets it wrong. And so later in life, people are working through, and sometimes they have to transition to what they would have preferred. And so there's things that you have no idea that a person is going through. Then there's gender identity, which is the internal sense that people have that they're a man or a woman or some variation. Gender expression can be congruent with gender identity or sex, but not always. So you may have somebody who is more masculine or more feminine, but that doesn't automatically assume that they're a male or a female. But it is part of our society, whether it's speech, behaviors, movements, what you wear, your hair, even we identify as masculine or feminine. And so you have to remember that sex and gender identity are not always congruent. And then you have gender identity. And this is something that I put into this presentation when I was talking to my mother-in-law, and I said something about cisgender, and she looked at me like I had no idea, or she had no idea what I was talking about. And I realized quickly I was not doing my job of explaining things to people if my own mother-in-law had no idea what cisgender was. So cisgender is having a gender identity that is consistent with your biological sex or physical anatomy. So think of it as consistent is cisgender, and someone who has transitioned is transgender. So somebody who's transitioned from what their biological sex or anatomy was at birth. So they've transitioned. So if you have not transitioned, if you haven't changed your pronouns from what they were growing up, or your name or your hormones, or done surgery, then you would be cisgender. And be aware that someone can identify as cisgender for a large part of their life and then realize that they are transgender and transition. I didn't transition until I was 26. So there is no one size fits all. Sexual orientation is going to be different. And sexual orientation is going to be somebody that, it's how you feel romantically towards someone. So LGB is your sexual orientation, lesbian, gay, bi, or straight. Trans, the T on the end of LGBT, is different. So it's important to understand that not all of the anybody part of the LGBTQ community, like I identify as a straight man, but I am part of the LGBTQ community because I'm a trans man. So it's important to understand the differences. Also, pronouns. So pronouns are getting more and more common. I have them in my Zoom bio. I believe Sandy put hers up. It's a fantastic way to help people understand what your pronouns are. And also from a trans perspective, it helps me see who is an ally. It helps me understand who understands the importance of pronouns. And also, when you transition, you often have to put your pronouns in a lot of things, because if you maybe haven't done hormone therapy, or you're not going to do hormone therapy, or your hormones haven't really kicked in yet, people are going to use your old pronouns. And so you have to put your pronouns in everything so that they use the proper pronouns. And what was happening is trans or non-binary individuals were putting their bio before Zoom in everything, whether it was their email or their social media, and it was an out. So you were getting outed by having your pronouns, because only people who didn't know their pronouns were putting it in their bios. And it started not being a safe thing to do. But then if you didn't do it, people would use the wrong pronouns. It was a catch-22. And so what happened is a lot of allies started this movement of including their pronouns in their bio. And it has now taken this entirely new identity. Instagram just added a pronoun section that you can put, and it's right next to your name. So right when people go to your Instagram, they can see your pronouns. And it's a fantastic way to just start the conversation. And from a marketing standpoint, a lot of people reach out to me and say, how do I let people know like I'm an ally and that they can buy or sell with me? Like, should I put a rainbow flag in my email? And, should I do this? And I said, you can if you want to, but really, honestly, pronouns are where the money's at. That's all it takes. If I was buying or selling back in the day before I became a realtor, and the realtor reached out to me about something and they had their pronouns in the email, I would have felt so much safer. It doesn't mean that they know everything about my experience, but it shows that they just care a little bit. It's a fantastic first start. So transitioning a little bit, wink, wink. So going into a new part of this, of the non-binary. So non-binary really has taken a lot of momentum in the last couple months / about this year, going from something that was never talked about to now being, I would say, the main conversation, right up with transgender rights. And non-binary is somebody who does not necessarily identify with male or female gender labels. So that could include somebody, if somebody says like they're agender or bigender or gender fluid or gender queer, that's their meaning non-binary. A lot of times their label may mean something a little bit different. It's always great to, if you feel comfortable and they seem like they're comfortable answering questions, ask a question. But it's important to understand that people can flow in and out of one label. And oftentimes they're going to rely heavily on they, them pronouns. And I have a lot of people push back on that because they'll say things like, well, they, them is not grammatically correct. And I do enjoy pushing back on their pushback of, think about how often we say they, them in regards to one person. So you have somebody and, oh yeah, that's John. Yeah, that's their house, or that's their new car, or, oh yeah, they just got their real estate license. We say they in regards to one person all the time. And what I encourage you to do is try to go a day, maybe have a spouse or a friend call you the wrong pronoun for one day. Intentionally call you the opposite pronoun that you are, and see how uncomfortable it makes you. That is what it feels like when you are trans or non-binary and people keep calling you the wrong pronoun. It does something to you that it's really hard to put into words, which is why I really encourage cis or straight individuals to try out, because you really can't grasp how uncomfortable pronouns are until you're called the wrong one. And then you really can understand the power of words. And so you want to be empathetic, because a lot of times, whether it's with they're applying for a mortgage or with title or whoever it may be, male and female are the predominant things that come up. Oftentimes it's going to be male, female, or other. Maybe it's at the doctor's office or something like that. And imagine if for your life, you just had to continuously check a box that said other. What that would do to you, how that would feel to just continuously feel like an other. And you're not an other, you're non-binary, but they haven't updated a lot of forms yet. They haven't had that be an option. And it is important to reference, this is not new. It's gaining traction right now, but historians have shown that two-spirited individuals or non-binary individuals have existed with Indigenous people for a very, very, very long time. So this isn't something that's just becoming popular. This has been around. And so we're just needing to adapt to the human experience. And prep your team. If you have maybe somebody at the front desk of your office, or if you have a team of individuals who work all together on one transaction, or your mortgage or title, let them know this individual goes by their name. If you want to use pronouns, use they and them. It's really important, though, to highlight how important it is to use this name. And if the name is different than what is on their ID card, really highlight, can we put this at the top, that this is the nickname, this is their preferred name. They have not updated their license yet. They're aware that title is going to be in this name, or that they're selling and that, the paperwork's going to be in this name. But if you call them, if you email them, if you text them, please use this preferred name, because those little things make a transaction so much better. We all know the stress people feel during a transaction. Adding on an additional stress of being outed or being discriminated against, it makes such a stressful but exciting thing just straight up stressful. And so if you can add that little bit of prep with your team, it can go a long way. So kind of going off of what I meant by the previous name. Well, what is that? A lot of times people are going to say dead name, given name, your birth name. And what it is it's the name that somebody has before they transition or become non-binary or come out as non-binary. And dead name can feel really intense. A lot of people are like, that's really dramatic. And it is. It definitely is an intense name that they decide, the community decided to go with. But the reason why is because transitioning truly is a intense experience. For myself, who I was before I transitioned, while I love that individual, there was a part of me that I was always, it was very performative because I was trying to fit into a part of society. Once I realized, like, oh no, I'm James, and I felt at home in my skin, I let go of that person. I said, thank you. I am very grateful for the lessons I learned while I was that individual, but I was not able to do both. I was not able to be both, to really embrace who I was, partly because the person who I was before, I wouldn't say was a lie, but a lot of it was trying to fit into something that I'm not. And so I do use the word dead name, and or sometimes mattering on the group I'm around, I'll say previous name. But it's really important not to ask somebody their dead name. And you may not say the word dead name, you might not know it, but you'll say, oh, what was your name before? And to you, it's a harmless thing because it's just a name. But to the person who you're talking to, it can be an emotionally triggering question, because that person represents not only who they were before, but it represents the pain, the depression, sometimes the suicidal thoughts they had when they weren't feeling at home in their body. And what I try to do is try to help you understand. Imagine if tomorrow when you woke up, everything about you that you do love is the opposite. You know, maybe you love your hair and your hair is amazing, and you wake up tomorrow and you're bald, and there's nothing wrong with being bald. Or maybe, you know, you do love being the woman that you are, and you wake up tomorrow and you're a man and you're in the wrong body, or everybody calls you the wrong pronouns, or you're Joan and everybody calls you John. And you may think like, well, James, it's not that big of a deal. But when you really put it into perspective and you really think about what it would be like to know in your brain that you're Joan, but everybody keeps calling you John, what that would do to you. And then you add the layer of buying a house. I mean, we all know, how often do we say this is going to be the most expensive thing somebody buys? We say that all the time. And this can be an extremely painful experience for LGBTQ, but specifically trans and non-binary individuals. And it can go all the way up to closing date. So a lot of time people don't think about the fact that when you close and you're signing all of the paperwork and title gets to the aliases, it is going to have your dead name on there because it's associated with your ID, your social security. It's a part of your past. I didn't even think about that. And I'm very grateful that the title agent either thought that they were misprints or just ignored it, and just pointed to it and said, do these aliases seem right? And I said yes, and we didn't bring it up, and it was fantastic. But there are people that may be in certain parts of, you know, in certain towns that are going to be a little bit more judgmental, or might out the person right then and there, or make discriminatory comments. And it's very important that the title you're working with, that the mortgage individuals you're working with, that you advocate for them, so that you're working with teams that are going to be able to handle those moments with grace, with as little attention as possible, and just understand what's happening. And if you know that they're trans or non-binary ahead of time, you can give title a heads up, which is very, very appreciated. So if you know they're trans, let them know. Like, this is an exciting day. We're closing. I do want to give you a heads up. There is going to be a moment when title asks about aliases. Your dead name or your previous name might be on there. It's not going to be a big moment. I just want you to know so that if you see it, it's not a triggering moment for you, that you can see it, and then we can move on and sign the rest of the paperwork. And can you just understand, like, that moment, how quick it was for me to say that? But imagine if somebody said that and gave you that heads up, how much that would mean. So that's just one little thing that you can do. Taking a step back from now that we understand the terms and have a little bit of kind of understanding of what it's like to exist as an LGBTQ individual, it's important to look at the big picture of what their whole life, what areas they're impacted on. And then remember that when they're coming to you, and this is really important to remember as a realtor in any situation, when people come to us, there are many different hats they're wearing. They're impacting, their lives are being impacted in multiple ways. How many times have we had deals fall apart because of things outside of the deal? It had absolutely nothing to do with the house, but other things are impacting them. Well, it's the same thing with somebody who's LGBTQ. You have the family relationships. LGBTQ youth are the highest rated homeless community. And so you have people who come out, they hope that they're going to come out to a safe environment, they're kicked out. Or you have somebody who is, let's say they weren't kicked out, but later in life, they wanted to start a family with their significant other, and they're trying to get pregnant. And it's an exceptionally expensive process. Also, and I like to add this as an asterisk, if you know somebody who's LGBTQ, don't say, it would be really cool if you had a brother and you could just use theirs, or something like those type of sentences dealing with creating a baby. A lot of times people say this, even in business environments, they'll say things not thinking about how awkward that is or how invasive that is. And also cisgender, and remember this is consistent with what identity they were born with, struggle with fertility issues. This is something that is really, really, really important. Since I have come out, and I'm very open about my transition, and my wife on my social media talk about our transition, I have had more cisgender straight couples reach out to me about their fertility issues. And they will say, even my sister or brother or whoever don't even know that we used a donor, or that we had to do IVF or whatever it may be. So I always just like to use this little moment to normalize a topic that I think is really important, because your clients, whether they're cisgender or trans or non-binary or lesbian or gay or whatever they may be, might be struggling with this. And we want to have empathy. You don't want to assume a lot about pregnancy. Then you transition into employment. They are one of the highest rated discriminatory classes, because if you have, I believe, a small business is 15 employees or less, you're allowed to discriminate in some states based off of LGBTQ status. And Washington and Oregon are not one of those states, thankfully. But if you have somebody who is moving from one of those states and they're stressed out about getting a new job here, or if they're going to be discriminated against, these are things to remember. Or peer and social relationships, maybe it's they were volunteers and they came out and they were told they can't volunteer or go to this church or whatever it may be. Education, all of these layers are baggages that LGBTQ individuals carry. And you want to have empathy towards that when you're dealing with the transaction, or if maybe your kid's friend comes out to you, or your neighbor comes out, or your kid comes out. You want to remember that there are so many aspects that go into an individual's life that it's not linear. And so we want to have an awareness. And then you add into all of those other things, personal safety, and you have people in intersecting identities. So you have somebody who is a trans woman, who is Black, who is a lesbian. Their experience in life will be dramatically different than mine as a trans man who's white, who's married to a white woman. And even in this scenario, I want you to really have an authentic moment with yourself, teaching this class, or if it was a trans woman who is Black, how would that change? How would your interaction with this class or your willingness to learn, where would it be? And there's nothing wrong with handling that conversation, with dealing with that and having that inner dialogue. It's really important. And it's important to talk about because in our industry, we know how much discrimination happens or how much it happened and the ripple effect of it. And change can't happen unless we're honest with ourselves, unless we learn. And so these are really, really uncomfortable conversations that are super crucial because the change is viable. It's there, it's possible, but we have to be willing to talk about it. And then housing also, which we will get into some of the stats of LGBTQ individuals in the housing market. 20 states do not explicitly prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation in regards to buying a home. And all the rules vary a little bit, but 20 states is 20 states too many. And Washington and Oregon, thankfully, do have a lot of laws protecting LGBTQ individuals. But just like I said, how many times do we have people moving from other states? Idaho is not one of the states that protects. So if you have somebody, if you're on that side of the state and you have somebody moving from Idaho over to Washington, their anxiety is going to be much higher than somebody who maybe is moving from Seattle over to the east side. And you want to be able to match that. You want to be able to let them know you're protected. I've got you. I know the laws. I know how to make sure that you're not discriminated against. And these are not all things you need to say every time you meet somebody and they say, oh yeah, I'm lesbian. And you're like, I got you. I got all the laws. I know everything. You don't need to be really intense, but having that ability of just saying, perfect. I'm going to be able to do everything I can in this transaction to make it as seamless as possible. That's all you have to say. You don't have to go really in depth, but having that peace of mind in the back of your head of, I know the laws. I know how to protect my client. Those things, they're worth their weight in gold because anxiety. I don't know if anyone on this call has ever struggled with anxiety or depression, but you can't put it into words. There's just something about it that when you add that to a transaction, it really just, it makes it even more miserable. And you don't want that for something like buying a new home, which can be so exciting. And then also the national LGBTQ homeownership rate is 16% below the overall national homeownership rate. And it also is believed that Nagal Rep agents believe from their experience with LGBTQ individuals that their buyers are settling on their home because they don't want to tour a lot of homes. They may not feel safe. They don't expect that they may even get the home. So they'll just put in an offer on what they think might be an okay option. And there's a lot of settling because of the psychological damage that goes into buying. So a lot of these things they're things I didn't think about before I got into this presentation and doing the research and seeing the human aspect of homeowning. So also, in regards to LGBTQ individuals. And there's a lot of stats. Your brain doesn't have to retain all of this, but 46% fear potential discrimination at the hands of, and it's not only the new neighbors or sellers, but also agents themselves. I remember being afraid not only if my agent found out that I was trans, but that if the sellers or the buyer's agent found out, if they would try to sabotage the deal. And nothing happened. And I think that's partly why I started this presentation, is because nothing happened to me and that experience was still painful. Imagine if something had happened, the true trauma that would have happened. And it made me realize discrimination happens all the time. It didn't happen to me, but it could have. And I still remember the stress I had, how many sleepless nights I had. I imagine what it would have been like for my peers in the LGBTQ community when they do experience that type of discrimination. And the discrimination happens, it's just at a different rate because it's 13% of LGBTQ homeowners claim to be victims of discrimination. So 13%, in my opinion, is 13% too many. And when it's a number like that, and it involves so many different range of individuals, whether it's title, mortgage, the new homeowners coming in or where they're selling, it can even be neighbors when people are touring a home and somebody says something, how it can be such a wide range. And now that you have social media, you can look up who your next buyer is going to be, whether people are supposed to do that or not. We know people do. And if I were buying a home again, my social media is my marketing. I can't go private while I'm buying a home. And so they will know that I am trans, and they will see my whole life. And there's a wide net for the possibility of discrimination. And so it's very, very important to lean into that knowledge, because 72% of all LGBTQ renters want to become homeowners. So as realtors in this industry, there are so many clients out there that want to be able to buy, that they want to stop being renters, but there are things holding them back. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I want to help as many people as possible. And I also not only want to help them, but I want to make the transaction really, really smooth. So how do you do this? How do you create a dream team? Well, talk with your broker, your transaction coordinator, anybody in the office. You want to create a safe environment. Not every trans client is going to look like me. I am stealth. So what does stealth mean besides sounding like a really cool spy? It is an individual who appears to match the gender that they identify with. So for all intents and purposes, I'm a dude. And when I go get my coffee and I say my name's James, nobody pushes back. Nobody says, "Are you sure?" Or when I say, "Oh yeah, my pronouns are he, him," nobody says, "I don't think so." And I cannot remember the last time I was discriminated against, that I was called out, that I was used, wrong pronouns. And so unless I want to out myself, or unless I know somebody is following me on social media, I don't come out for safety reasons. I have 2 kids. There are times and places that I am protective over myself, and that is a privilege, because there are certain people who do not have that privilege, whether it is a trans man who maybe the hormones haven't done the changes like this, maybe their voice didn't drop, or they didn't get a beard, or they don't want to be on hormones, they just want to change their name, or a trans woman. A trans woman's transition is going to look dramatically different. So you have a trans woman who is 6 foot and is not able to afford a voice coach. So for a trans man, testosterone deepens the voice. It gives, for me, it gave me this beautiful silky voice that I love. But for trans women, you have to have a voice coach. Estrogen does not change the voice the way that testosterone does. And so let's say you have somebody who has been saving all of their money up to buy a home, and they can't afford a voice coach, and they can't afford to have laser hair removal. And maybe they have a wig, or they've grown out their hair a little bit. They come into your office. It is very evident that they are a trans woman, and you have an office where you maybe didn't know that they were a trans woman. Maybe you've been communicating through email or whatever, and you have not prepped your office to handle these scenarios well, of asking people's pronouns before you start talking to them. What happens when that woman walks in and is called sir, or is mispronounced their name, intentionally masculinizing it, whatever it may be? One, do you think they're going to want to work with you? And 2, that starts the tone of the entire transaction. So it's very, very important to have empathy towards that. And also, from a privilege standpoint, I am able to, in a sense, hide for safety what makes me part of an oppressed community. Somebody who is a person of color does not have that ability. And so it's very important to acknowledge that difference of privilege and where that puts me as a trans man, a white trans man, versus a trans woman who is a woman of color. So it's important to prep your team. Also, check with your title company or your mortgage company if they have the ability to create a tool that puts a preferred name or their pronouns at the top of the file so that whoever calls, they know this is who, this is their name, this is their pronouns. Even if all the paperwork says John, they go by Joan or they go by Jill, this is their pronouns. And it helps create a more personalized transaction. Also, it's important to understand that not every person wants their spouse to be spouse. In the LGBTQ community, partner is something that people wear with pride. There was a time when you couldn't be married, and so you had a partner, and the older generation really still clings to that. You know, they still call their spouse partner, and so they don't want to have their partner called spouse or wife or husband. They wear that name with pride. So it's important to ask, oh, is this your spouse or partner? Which one would you prefer? A lot of this is asking what the preferred language is. And it may seem inconvenient at first, but once you start to normalize it, it really makes you will see the difference when you're working with LGBTQ individuals. You will see how much they appreciate the difference. So other than talking to the title about preferred names or whatever, how else can you protect your client? Well, first and foremost, don't out them. So talk to them about who is okay. So let them know, I am going to need to talk the title. If you haven't already talked and gotten pre-approved, this is a great conversation for you to say, go get pre-approved. But let them know there will be people that you need to talk to them about this. If they haven't changed their ID, or if they haven't changed their license or whatever it may be, letting them know, I want to make sure they call you the right name. Your ID does say John, but I want them to know that you go by Joan. So this is the plan. I can come out for you to all these people and then have them get in touch with you. So the moment they start talking to you, you are Joan to them the entire time. And it's a great way to make sure the entire team's on the same page. I last year had a friend of mine who was trans, and I didn't know that when they bought the house we were selling, that it was in their dead name. And so we had a conversation with title, and I was able to make it like easy peasy. We didn't have to deal with anything like surprise. And so it was an ability to help ease something that could have been a really awkward conversation if I was not if I wasn't trans or a trans friendly client. Also, you want to make sure that you have a place for like a title for spouse or partner if you can, because a lot of the times we put on the purchase and sale agreement a married couple or other couple, you know what I mean? And it really others LGBTQ individuals, because there are still LGBTQ couples who don't want to get married, that are partners. They've been partners for a very long time. They don't want to get married. So it's important having these conversations with people. Just a lot of this is just avoiding conversations that could hurt people and honoring the culture that people have had. So here's an example of adding pronouns to your email. Very subtle. It's not like I have a huge rainbow flag right next to my name. If you want to, you can. There's great rainbow emojis and trans flag emojis if you want to. But it's very simple, very subtle, and you can add them to your business cards. If you are in an office and you guys have IDs, you can do it to your IDs. There's a lot of subtle ways that you can do this. I highly encourage you going onto Instagram, taking a look and updating any social media that you can. And honestly, I mean, I'm really big into social media marketing. I think it's a super fun way. And it's a great way for you to market to the younger demographic, showing that you know how to help, that you've got your pronouns on there, and you're doing your best to be an advocate or an ally. And there is a difference between being an advocate or an ally. To me, an advocate is somebody who stays on top of the laws. They really are in a constant state of learning. An ally is somebody who is safe. Maybe they don't know a whole lot about the laws. Maybe they aren't reaching out to the governors or, doing a lot of that type of work, but they're still trying to create a safe environment. Neither one is better than the other. I just like to I like to change up what the words mean. That was a hard word. So there is a difference, in my opinion, between advocate or ally. Both are valid. Both are very important. It is important, though, if you're able to stay up on the laws that affect LGBTQ individuals. I say this from a personal experience. Just recently during the election, I was talking to my father and my mom about somebody who was running. And I said, just like the anxiety I had. And my dad was like, well, why? And I was like, oh, well, they've just been really against a lot of, like, they've been trying to pass some LGBTQ laws and anti-laws. And he was like, what are you talking about? And it goes kind of hand in hand with how I hadn't done a good job of explaining to my mother-in-law what cisgender was. And I kind of looked at my dad and I was like, well, haven't you seen all like the laws that are going on with like trans stuff? And he was like, I literally have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, okay, you need to Google that. I don't have the time right now. I'll talk to you later about it. He calls me like 2 hours later and he's like, I had no idea there were so many laws in place that were trying to take away your rights or like trans youth rights. My own dad, I hadn't, because you just kind of start to get into this rhythm that you just kind of assume people know what you know, and they don't. And it's okay that they don't. But it's important that if you do want to be an advocate or an ally, to try to build in a routine, just like we stay up on our hours with real estate. Have a check-in, once a year. Take a look at, whether it's trans equality. I think it's transequality.com. There's a few different websites that you can go to that are very, very easy for you to update. Oh, this is what laws have been passed. This is what people are doing to help the LGBTQ community. And also just from a real estate standpoint, where are the laws in regards to discrimination? Also, be willing to stand up. There are going to be some uncomfortable conversations, whether it is in your own office, where somebody makes a LGBTQ, maybe a homophobic or a transphobic joke. To you, it might just be a joke, but you don't know who is coming in the office, or a buyer who might be coming in, or truthfully, an agent who's in the office who might be trans. More people are stealth than you realize. No matter how much you think your trans radar is great, people have transitioned and are stealth. I would say at least 2 or 3 people write me a week saying, nobody knows I'm trans. And I'll go to their page and I wouldn't know. Nobody knows I'm trans. I think I'm ready to come out to my coworkers. What should I do? And it makes me wonder how many times their coworkers have told transphobic jokes or made fun of Caitlyn Jenner or whoever it may be. And they were standing right there the entire time. And so it's super important how we watch the jokes we make, the people we mock or judge, because you don't know. And also, if somebody does come out to you and you find out that they're trans, try not to say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. You don't even look trans, or you look so good, I wouldn't even know you're trans. Let's unpack that sentence for a second. When you say, oh my gosh, you look so good, you don't even look trans, what does that sound like? It sounds a lot like when you say, oh my gosh, you look so good now that you've lost weight. Do you hear it? How all of a sudden what it's saying is what you were before is not as good as what you are now. Before, when people looked trans, they didn't look good. But now that you don't look trans, you look good. And that's not fair, because there's nothing wrong with looking trans, because being trans is awesome. I am awesome because I am me, because I'm trans. Whether I look trans to you or I don't look trans, I love who I am. And it's super important to empower people on any spectrum of where they're at. And so I know people mean it kindly. I take it kindly. I don't call them out and say like, well, that was really transphobic, because they're trying to be kind. But what you want to do is try to shift your language to embrace the fact that being trans, being non-binary on any spectrum is okay. And that you can just say, that's so awesome. That's literally all you have to say. If someone comes out to you that's trans, that's so awesome. Good for you. Awesome. And then you move on. What pronouns would you like to use? What name do you want me to call you? Or is everything staying the same? Like, how can I be an ally for you? And that's all you have to do. So you don't have to understand somebody's situation to respect it or to be empathetic. A lot of times allies will say things to me and they'll say, I have no idea how to be an ally. And I'll say, you're literally doing it. You're sharing my content, or you're sharing other people's content, or you're learning, you're staying up to date on the laws. All of you right now are doing a great job because you showed up to learn. And that is super, super important. This is a very intense conversation. It's ongoing, and it's important to have empathy for yourself also, that you're learning and you're gonna mess up sometimes. I want to give you a heads up. When you mess up, just say sorry really quick. So let's say you meet somebody and they say, oh, I used to be John. I'm actually Joan now. I'm she, her. And you're like, oh, okay. And then your spouse walks up and you're like, oh, hey. And then my wife's Courtney. Oh, Courtney, this is John. I'm so sorry. Joan, she da 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 da. Do you see how subtle that apology was? I didn't profusely, oh my gosh. Oh, Joan, I did it again. I'm so sorry. And all of a sudden, who's the apology about? Is it about Joan? No, it's about me. And it's validating that, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The more subtle you make it, whether it's in a transaction, a friend, you're a parent, and your youth is transitioning, or a sibling or a friend or whoever it is that you're interacting with, the more subtle you make the apology, the better. We don't need big, extravagant apologies. Those make it worse. It draws attention to the topic. Subtle, better. So it's important to also understand, I mess up too. I have met individuals who are trans, and I still mess up on pronouns. So perfection is not expected. It's just the effort that we're looking for here. And also, if you meet somebody and you are maybe telling a story about from before they transitioned, and you want to score some major points and honestly just be a kind person all around, reference who they were with their new name. It's my favorite thing when my mom is telling a story about when I was a kid and she says, oh my gosh, yeah, when James was a little boy and he would do these things. And I always remember when James da 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 da, and she sees me for me. Because in my head growing up, that's exactly who I was. Now, maybe I didn't understand that my name I was going to get to pick James later, but I was a little boy and I have 3 sisters. I grew up thinking one of these is not like the other. And so I always wanted to have that ability to be called a little boy. So when my mom references that, it means the world to me. When I run into friends from high school and they intentionally go out of their way to tell a story and use my dead name, and I know what they're doing is they're trying to prove, see, I knew you beforehand. While I get the effort they're trying, it is so frustrating because I want to say, I get it. Yay for you. You knew me before I transitioned. That's awesome. Can you just use my new name? And I do have friends who I went to high school with who I haven't seen in 10 years. I think I ran into somebody, I can't remember. It was a bit ago. It was before COVID. They used my new name and they were telling a story to their spouse and they used my new name, and it meant the world to me because it made me feel like they saw me and there was respect there. So it's okay that you're not going to get it right all the time, but just try to see them as who they are introducing themselves to you today. Also, don't assume. So, and I say this for anybody and everybody, you do not want to single out the one person in a group of individuals who appears non-binary or trans. So it would be horrible. Let's say you're meeting up with people and you say, oh, hi, I'm James. And they go, Liz, Sandy, John, and then they go to Jill and you're like, oh, Jill, oh, nice to meet you, Jill. What are your pronouns, Jill? And you didn't ask everybody else. It really outs Jill. But if you can start to normalize asking people pronouns, telling people your pronouns, it takes away those awkward moments. And especially if you're doing a transaction, start to normalize that in your buyer meeting or your listing meeting, that everybody's on the same page. And, some people are going to be uncomfortable. Like, what do you mean by pronouns? And it really shows you how much we don't talk about pronouns, but how intimate pronouns are in our society. Because when I start talking about pronouns to people who aren't in this environment where they are choosing to come and learn, they are very either confused. I'll say, oh, I'm James, he, him. What are your pronouns? And they'll be like, I don't, what is that she, he, him? Are my pronouns he, him? And they'll be asking me. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, sure. Do you like it when people say he or him to you? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, then yeah, your pronouns are he, him. And it shows you some of these people are like 40 or 50 years old. They have gone their entire life and never questioned it. They've never thought, do I like these terms that are being used? Do I not like them? It just is what it is. And it amazes me how many times I'll come out to people and they'll say, yeah, growing up, I always wanted to change my name. And they're cis, but they just didn't love their name. And they'll be envious that I got to change my name. And it makes me sad that people are so in this place of, well, these are my pronouns, this is my name, and this is how it is. I don't get to change it. So if you ask, a lot of times people might say, actually, this is the nickname I like to go by, or I do want to try a different pronoun out. So it's always better to ask versus assuming. And then also adding your pronouns to your email signature is a great way to go, your Zoom name, social media, and then practice with friends. So normally when we're in person, I say turn to the person sitting next to you. We can't do that. But if you are with your office, or if you're at home, or if there's a time and place where you're able to practice this, it's really, really awesome to start normalizing, turning to somebody and saying, my name is James. I go by he, him, or they, them, or she, her. What's your name? What are your preferred names, pronouns? And also, before we finish up, there is some tension on the term preferred pronouns in the LGBTQ community. Some people don't like that the word preferred is added because it's not preferred. It is a fact. These are my pronouns. I do keep preferred pronouns just so I can help educate people on where that difference is. But by no means do I want you to think that they're preferred and you have the ability to choose for them. So they're not preferred. Those are the people's pronouns. If they say to you, he, him, and to you, they look like she, her, that's great for you that you think that. They are he, him. So it's not preferred in the sense of it's up for debate or an option. This is a fact. So preferred pronouns, when people say that, does not mean that you get to have a say in it. It's just a term that we use. But I would definitely encourage you to try to find a time and place to practice when you're able to. And there you go. That's the presentation. And I 3 minutes early, so got it right on the nose. So what we can do now is go into the Q&A time. I'm going to get a drink of tea because I talked a lot.
Okay. So we had a couple questions. One was, what are some good resources or places to go to learn about laws affecting LGBTQ plus communities related to real estate / discrimination?
That's a fantastic one. And actually what I'm going to do is pull up, and I'll actually go back to screen sharing. I can also have I can email this out to you, Liz, but it is obviously harder to get it to everybody. But let's see here. Okay, so if everybody has a second, you can write down some of these resources. Transequality.org is a really great resource for kind of going over the trans experience. For laws, transgenderlawcenter.org. And it's not specific. I do believe they have a specific housing tab, but they have a wide range of information. And then if you're interested in being an ally and understanding more, GLAAD, so it's not GLAAD, GLAD, but GLAAD.org. There's going to be a lot of information. If you go to just the base websites, these are all just LGBTQ friendly websites. A few are transgender specific, like Transgender Law Center. PFLAG, if anybody on here is a parent of an individual who is LGBTQ, or you maybe have a niece or nephew, or mostly what I mean is a youth, PFLAG is I don't know exactly what it actually stands for, but I believe it's parent flag. And it is a parent resource. It's a great resource for a lot of different communities. Clark County has their own PFLAG. It's not branch, but kind of group. And then if you are wanting to see more of a human aspect, Raquel Willis does a great job. She's a writer. She's a transgender activist who is Black, and she's fantastic. She's a fantastic author. So these are some of the resources that I send out at the end of these for more corporations where they're able to just email it to all the employees. So definitely check those out. Those are they all have a lot of tabs that you can really honestly get lost in all the rights and all the laws and all the statistics. And then Nagal Rep, I do believe I saw. Do you want me to keep this up for a little bit?
Sure. Or
Okay.
you can send it to me and I can send it out to everybody that's attended today. And then anybody who watches the recording can reach out to me if they want it as well.
Perfect. And then I do have, I think, I have the social media handles right here if you are interested in seeing more of the personal side of my stuff. So I'll have that on the resources page as well. Somebody asked, what is Nagal Rep? So Nagal Rep is, put me on the spot for what the acronym is. National.
In the chat also. It's the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals.
Thank you. I knew the gay and lesbian. I knew the GL. I got that. And they do great work. They have a lot of information on their website. It's a great resource for realtors. Let's see.
There's a couple inquiries about sharing the slides, and I didn't have permission to do that from you, James. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't have the ability to share the slides just for intellectual property, but the PowerPoint, this was recorded. So if you want to watch it and go through it that way, you can.
Perfect. And let's see. Oh, when you get around to it, I would like to hear how the wholesaling buying your homes went with the bank.
I won't lie, my wife did almost all of it. So I will say, who did we go with? I can't remember now. I mean, this was a long time ago. I think it was Home Street Bank. Now, obviously, I would go with someone local, but at the time, they were fantastic. I don't think that they ever asked. I think she might have brought up that my name would have been different. I don't think she outed me. I think she mentioned something like, and I really apologize, they decided to do lawn work today. So if it's really loud, I apologize. So I believe she said his name would look different. And if you have any questions, let me know. And then he never did. So I think that's how she handled it. Obviously now I would just be really open because, and this is what I've told my friends, like I have friends in California who are looking to buy and sell and such. And I'll say, be open, because if they're going to discriminate against you, you would rather not give them your money. So be open. And if they're going to say something or do something that is not okay, keep their information. And if you want to file a complaint, or just don't give them your money. And thankfully I had a great interaction with all parties involved, but I wish I would have done more research, because now I became a realtor a year later. And if I had been able to figure out, like Nagal Rep, I didn't know Nagal Rep existed, but if I could have given my money to either an advocate or an ally or an LGBTQ individual, I would have rather done that. We did the cliche, it's who she bought her house with, and the person had been keeping us on the drip. And so she'd been getting the emails. So we were like, sure, we'll just go with that person. And I never came out, literally ever. I never once. And I remember every time I saw her, I was like, I think she knows. My wife was like, this is miserable. Why don't you just tell her? I'm like, we're too far in. What if she discriminates against us? And then we lose both the houses, because it was a contingent offer. So, yeah. So, but the bank, it worked out well. I think I definitely would have been more honest and just dealt with what would have happened. Let's see here. Oh, can you repeat, other than husband and wife, what are other choices on the contract? I don't believe we have the ability on the contract. It's just either married persons or couple not married, or something along those lines. More than anything, I mean it to be, because how many times do we have to say it's how the contract's written, we apologize, or I know this is very wordy, or you know what I mean? You just kind of blame the contract. But when you're talking to them, and they say, process of buying our first home, my wife was left off of title, likely due to a misunderstanding of our marriage status due to her being trans. And complicated things like that happen a lot. So it's important to ask the questions. And what I did, because I am ADHD, even though I'm an ally, I would still mess questions up. And so what I did is I printed out basically what I tried to teach here of, okay, what is it that I want to know? What are their pronouns? And then I throw in other stuff like anniversary or birthday or something like that, so you can do a gift, you know. But it's, instead of it just being like randomly trying to piece together the client, now I have it where I'm able to just say like, okay, like in the buyer's meeting or the listing meeting or whatever, adding that normalcy that I'm trying to get to know them. And then I tell them about myself a little bit. I don't always out myself to every client. A lot of my clients are referrals from social media. I rely heavily on social media because of being trans. So from my perspective, I would much rather not make as much, but make what I can with the people who know I'm trans, so that when I'm walking into a house, I'm safe. Or if I'm touring a home, I'm touring a home with someone who's safe, versus working a lot with strangers and really, really hoping I'm not touring a home with someone who would want to hurt me. And that seems really dramatic, but it happens. And I think a lot of the women on this call can understand that feeling of not feeling safe when you're on a tour, or being careful. And it's just something that you have to do, and you have to be mindful of it. So that's something that I went into, is I leaned heavily into social media so that I would not. So basically, if somebody was reaching out to me and they did a millisecond look of me online, they were like, oh, okay, he's trans. That guy's trans. Like, either we want to work with him or we don't. Like, you know, so that's what I did. But I still will talk about kind of hinting at LGBTQ stuff in a buyer or listing meeting, just so that I know right away, is this going to be an awesome transaction, or am I going to feel unsafe the entire time?
Okay, are there any other questions for James? No.
Oh. Can you explain Q and Q+? Yes, absolutely. So everybody uses things a little bit differently, and feel free to write questions as I'm answering them. I know that this is a overwhelming topic, but I don't mind answering whatever you got. So you will see LGBT or LGBTQ or LGBTQ+. All are technically the same thing, but it kind of ranges on how inclusive the person is being intentionally. Not that they're, or I would say being unintentionally. They're not intentionally excluding Q, which can either be queer or questioning. It's just some people only think of LGBT. Some people think of LGBTQIA, which is lesbian, so LGBTQ, and then it's not intersex. It might be. I literally just read about this yesterday, but my brain is fried. And asexual or agender. So there is a wide range of the different letters. And so I would encourage you to look those letters up, because some places will have a sticker that says like LGBTQIA friendly. And I've had people message me and be like, what does this mean? And I'll tell them like, why did you Google it? Why did you reach out to me? You like, and you know, it happens, but yeah. So normally it's either queer or questioning is normally what Q means. And if you missed the beginning part, what I kind of referenced is queer is a term. It was used against the LGBTQ community very harshly, and now kind of the younger generation is trying to get that power back, so they will use it. But I highly discourage anyone who is not LGBTQ to use it. Don't say queer unless you're part of the community, and be aware that you might literally be in a group of people who one LGBTQ individual loves the term, and another LGBTQ individual hates the term. It's a very interesting topic right now in our community. So yeah. Anybody else have any other questions? And thank you, both of Darla and Rima.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate everybody who's added their pronouns. Well done.
All right. Any other questions before we end? No? Going once? Twice? All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. Thank you, James, for that great presentation. We appreciate you. And yeah, I'm going to end it. All right.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
very,
James.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you to everybody for showing up. I really
everyone.
appreciate it.